If it's Thursday, Russia unleashes a barrage of missiles pummeling Ukrainian cities and piercing its air defenses with the rarely used hypersonic weapons, as Washington's top intelligence chiefs testify on global threats for a second day. Plus, new safety concerns and calls for more accountability amid a tense hearing on Capitol Hill featuring the CEO of Norfolk Southern, who says he commits to make things right in East Palestine, Ohio, as he testifies for the first time since that toxic train derailment last month. And President Biden unveils his 2024 priorities and sets the stage for a battle with the GOP as he unveils his budget in battleground Pennsylvania. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I am Chuck Todd reporting in Washington, and we're going to begin with one of the most sweeping aerial bombardments by Russia since the war in Ukraine began more than a year ago. Overnight, the Kremlin launched a new wave of attacks using a powerful weapon it virtually never uses in this war. According to Ukrainian officials, Russia struck Ukraine with a half-dozen hypersonic missiles. They travel at least 10 times the speed of sound. Of course, Ukraine's air defenses were powerless to stop these missiles. Moscow's supply of those missiles, however, is quite limited, and it raises questions about why it's using them at this point in the war for what they're trying to do. How many missiles do they have left, and who might they turn to if they need more? According to Ukraine's president, the widespread missile barrage struck infrastructure and residential buildings in 10 different regions of Ukraine, as far west as the city of Lviv and as far south as the city of Kherson. All told, Russia launched more than 80 missiles, and according to the Institute for the Study of War, 6 different types of missiles were used and deployed in these attacks to ensure that at least some could not be struck down by what has been a fairly effective Ukrainian air defense system. Now, Ukrainian officials say at least 6 people were killed during the intense nighttime bombardment. President Zelensky says Russia chose to attack while most Ukrainians slept as a means to intimidate civilians. All of this, of course, comes as the top U.S. intelligence officials have been testifying this week before Congress on the annual Worldwide Threats initiatives. And they appeared today before the House Intel Committee. Here was National Intelligence Director Avril Haines.
The Russians are making incremental progress on Bakhmut, which is not a particularly strategic objective, but are otherwise facing considerable constraints, including personnel and ammunition shortages, dysfunction within the military's leadership, exhaustion, and morale challenges. And even as the Russian offensive continues, they are experiencing high casualty rates. Putin is likely better understanding the limits of what his military is capable of achieving and appears to be focused on more modest military objectives for now.
Our foreign correspondent, Aaron McLaughlin, has more from Dnipro, Ukraine.
Hey there, Chuck. We awoke this morning in the capital, Kyiv, to the sound of what is likely to have been a hypersonic missile striking a power plant in the heart of the city. A big boom could be echoed throughout the streets of the Ukrainian capital. One of 6 hypersonic missiles believed to have been deployed by the Russians today, although Ukrainian officials I've been talking to say that it was deployed to very little military effect. They see this more as a propaganda tool for the Kremlin to show that it's taking action in Ukraine to a domestic audience. Still a very scary day for the people of Ukraine, especially in the region of Zaporizhia. The largest nuclear power plant in Europe lost power. Its outside supply of power today, forced to rely on backup diesel generators. At the time, Ukrainian officials say they have enough diesel to back up the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant for some 15 days. Nevertheless, very concerning. We heard from the IAEA Director General today sounding the alarm on the situation with the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Take a listen to what he had to say.
This cannot go on. I am astonished by the complacency. Yes, the complacency. If we allow this to continue time after time, then one day our luck will run out.
Now, that power plant has since been connected to that outside power supply, the crisis averted for now. But there is no clear answer to the IAEA Director General's question. It is unclear at this hour what is being done to prevent that kind of attack, to prevent the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant from being cut off from its power supply, given that the Russian forces continue to occupy the nuclear plant. Chuck?
Aaron McLaughlin on the ground force in Ukraine, and that nuclear power plant, it seems like we have been playing with matches near a place we shouldn't be playing with matches. Joining me now is our global security reporter, Dan DeLuce. Dan, I want to talk about the use of these hypersonic weapons. We don't have them. China and Russia do. This is one of these rare cases where their technology is ahead of ours on the military front, is it not?
Perhaps,
okay.
But I think the real issue here is that Russia had to use a really sophisticated, expensive weapon, and for a means they didn't need to, for a method they didn't need to use, right? So they could use a much more simple weapon, and it does indicate, by all accounts, that they're running out of ammunition.
That's what we think here, right? That this was sort of like, hey, we got to use the good stuff. We're out of the cheap stuff.
That's the takeaway. The other thing is we're now getting into spring, and Ukraine kept the lights on, just barely. The electric grid did survive, and I don't think anyone totally expected that, even the White House. They have managed to keep their grid working. They've managed to shoot down a lot of these missiles, by the way. Dozens of the missiles that were fired were shot down.
This is an air defense system that we helped them put together as well, right?
Absolutely. We've helped them a huge amount.
Is this the one way the Israelis have actually helped too?
We don't know that.
Okay.
No. The Israelis have stopped short of that so far.
Because there had been some talk that on this missile defense, they have some technology that could be helpful.
They have tremendous technology, and Ukraine has pleaded for that.
Yes, and they haven't gotten it. What is our status when it comes to these hypersonic missiles that travel at 10 times the speed of sound?
The administration doesn't like to talk about these things. I think it is a big focus. But, I mean, artificial intelligence, satellites, space, all of this is very much on the agenda. You're looking at a huge defense budget and now being proposed.
I was just going to say, to see a Democratic president propose the jump, I mean, that is a headline that has been buried by the politics of the budget. That says something, because that's something there will be bipartisan support
for. And it will no doubt get passed as well.
And in some ways, having the Russians use this hypersonic missile probably almost motivates lawmakers to fund this request, doesn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Dan DeLuce, giving us some extra clarity there. Dan, thank you. Let me bring in, for more on the war and trying to get a better understanding of what this means for the Russia side of things. I want to bring in our retired admiral, James Stavridis is, of course, the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO and NBC News' chief international analyst, and Michael McFaul, who's, of course, a former U.S. ambassador to Russia and is one of our NBC News national security and international affairs analysts. Jim, let me start with you. Do you see the use of these hypersonic missiles as proof, as Dan seemed to report as well, that Russia may be running out of missiles? That's why they had to go to the good stuff.
Possibly. I'll give you another explanation, which is demonstrative. Russia likes to showcase that hypersonic capability. They're in a war. Here's a chance to do it. But, keep it in perspective. They only have between 50 and 100 of these total from everything I can see. So to shoot 6 of them in a single night says either A, they are really running down, like you say, Chuck. B, they are seeking to demonstrate the capability. And C, they really want to go after this electric grid, particularly during the winter months, because they feel, I think quite incorrectly, that ultimately that would be a path toward cracking the will of the Ukrainian people. I wouldn't bet against the Ukrainian people in that regard.
Well, I was just going to say, have we already passed the point of where this could have been an effective strategy by the Russians to cut Ukraine off the grid? Like the fact that we're the calendar marches forward. We're getting awfully close to the official start of spring.
Indeed. And secondly, history shows us when you bombard these populations, as the Nazis did to the Brits with the Blitz in the Second World War, typically it stiffens the resistance. And I think that's what we're going to see here.
Mike McFaul, if Putin is okaying the use of hypersonic missiles, should that make us nervous? He might okay the use of even more powerful weapons?
No, I wouldn't jump to that conclusion, although we should always be worried about him using, I think you're implying nuclear weapons, right, Chuck?
Yeah.
But I got to say, I'm very struck that he used these weapons. I remember the speech when he rolled out this. It's called the Kinjal weapon system that you're talking about. He rolled it out back in 2018 as part of the suite of weapons that they have for nuclear weapons, Chuck. And this was supposed to be to get around our missile defense systems. He was very proud of that fact. So that he's using it for these kind of air raids, killing women and children in Ukraine, I think is a sign of desperation. You don't use these kinds of weapons for the kinds of terrorist attacks that he's doing. And I just want to underscore what you just were talking about with the Admiral. It's not working. People in Kiev aren't terrified. In Ukraine, they're not terrified by Putin anymore. I was just talking to people this morning. Yeah. They're used to it. They have their generators. This is not working. It's not making people more prone to say, hey, President Zelensky, maybe we better stop fighting. Just the opposite.
Yeah, eventually Floridians figure out when it rains. And in some ways,
I'm a Floridian, and I just want to add that we were talking earlier about the distant boom. The distant boom is Vladimir Putin's head exploding in frustration at the debacle unfolding in front of him.
So let's talk about if he's depleting, if he's got a missile gap here and he's got a munitions problem, Jim, could the Iranians, North Koreans, and Chinese backfill that for them or not?
Not in the case of Iran or North Korea. Yes, in the case of China. And that's why we ought to be doing absolutely everything we can to send a message to Beijing overtly. We've done some of that, releasing our intelligence, suggesting they're considering it, but also sub rosa through our ambassador there, Nick Burns, a superb diplomat. We need to be flooding the zone with a message to China that is going to be crossing a line with the United States if they jump in with weapons to Vladimir Putin.
Mike, I am curious, do you think Putin had to use this hypersonic weapon as a way to prove to some of the hawks that he was willing to do whatever it takes?
Maybe, but maybe not. I think we tend to overplay the hawks. Like, who are they, right, Chuck? Prigozhin,
the chef, right? Isn't he basically the chief hawk?
Give me a break.
Yeah.
He runs a paramilitary operation. By the way, his soldiers and his criminals are dying in Bakhmut. It doesn't even seem like the generals, Gerasimov, supports him. He has no political movement, and it's a dictatorship. So this idea that he's attacked by the hawks, which is, we talk about it on TV and lots of commentators talk about it. I just think we overplay that. I think it's more a sign of desperation, as you were alluding to before. And he is running out of weapons. The thing that he has more of than the Ukrainians have or we have is time. He thinks, if time is on his side, if he can just gut it out, keep where he's at, keep his positions now, the Ukrainians will run out of soldiers and will run out of attention, and eventually that will play to his advantage.
Jim, what do you think? He did this last night. If he does it again tonight, is it a strategy?
No.
Okay.
All it is throwing, in this case, missiles at the problem, and it's not going to fix it. And by the way, if he does it at the same pace, he'll be out of hypersonic cruise missiles in 5 to 10 days. I'd call that not a strategy, but a failure.
I'm curious, how far behind is American technology on this hypersonic front, Jim?
Not far at all. I'll leave it there for reasons of classification.
No, I understand that. Is this just something we didn't emphasize and our two chief competitors, China and Russia, did? Or why? It's rare for us to lose one of these races, that's all.
Yeah, think of it this way, Chuck. We are exploring such a wide range of technologies constantly. Perhaps we didn't put enough in this basket. On the other hand, we put a lot in space, in cyber, in quantum computing, and dozens of other things, artificial intelligence, in which we do maintain a lead. And believe me, our teams, our R&D, our defense firms are capable of closing this gap very quickly.
And what about on the defense side of it? Having missile defenses that can keep up with these hypersonic missiles. Where would you say we are technologically on that?
we are approaching what will be a breakthrough, which is going to be when we stop trying to shoot down this incoming high-speed telephone pole with another telephone pole. What's coming next are laser weapons that'll be capable of doing that. Unlimited quantities, high speed, speed of light. You can go 10 times the speed of sound. You can't go faster than the speed of light. Watch for lasers.
And Mike, I want to talk about the growing intelligence out there that says perhaps Ukrainians were behind the damage on the Nord Stream pipeline. What is the diplomatic damage if that is indeed the growing agreed-upon assessment by Western allies?
Well, first, I'd say the assessments are pretty vague. Great reporting, but based on vague assessments. And that's the way it should be, by the way. I'm getting tired of somebody. I like it when the Biden administration takes the decision to declass information. I think that's brilliant. I don't like it when people in the government talk to reporters about things that are classified. So I'm glad it's that way. Second, the Ukrainians are not going to claim credit for it, and everybody's going to agree to disagree about how it was done. I think it does help to take away attention from the United States, right? The Russians are saying that the United States did it. And maybe, just maybe, I'm just guessing, but maybe the Biden administration wanted to throw this out here to suggest, in fact, that it was not us, because that plays into the Putin narrative if it was us.
I am just curious, how much of that had caught, had that gained real traction, or was that just Russian propaganda?
It wasn't just Russian propaganda. Lots of people believed it because there are very few countries that have the capabilities to do what was done, right? So, I want to emphasize, I'm guessing here, but it seems to me that the U.S. administration, the Biden administration, wanted to put out some information to suggest that, in fact, it was not the United States. It may have been somebody else.
Well, it was great to have you, Jim Stavridis, retired admiral, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, Michael McFaul, former ambassador to Russia. It was a rough night last night in Ukraine. It was really helpful to have you guys explain why it might not have been a good night for the Russians. Thank you both. Coming up, hours after another train derailment, the Norfolk Southern CEO testified before the Senate for the first time since the toxic train disaster last month in Ohio. His apologies, his promises to Congress, and the fallout from his testimony are next. Plus, Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, hospitalized after a fall yesterday, will have the latest on his condition and that concussion and the reaction on Capitol Hill. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. The CEO of the rail company Norfolk Southern was on the Hill today, testifying in a Senate hearing on the catastrophic derailment of one of his company's trains in East Palestine, Ohio last month. Alan Shaw spoke just hours after another Norfolk Southern train, by the way, derailed in Alabama this morning. It's the company's third derailment since February. Now, Norfolk Southern has faced intense criticism for the East Palestine accident and for the response to residents of the town in the face of major health concerns potentially caused by those toxic chemicals released when the derailed cars carrying hazardous material caught fire. Now, Shaw began his congressional testimony by apologizing to the community and committing to remain present during the cleanup.
I want to begin today by expressing how deeply sorry I am for the impact this derailment has had on the residents of East Palestine and the surrounding communities. We're going to be there today, tomorrow, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. I've told the community that. I've been there in person. I've looked into their eyes. I've heard their concerns. I've been in their family rooms. I'm committed to that community, and so is Norfolk Southern.
Not surprisingly, though, Shaw faced some aggressive questioning from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, seeking some answers on what caused the derailment and whether the company would commit to backing new legislation that would prevent similar disasters.
Okay, so let's get back to what we're here for, is try to solve the problem in front of us. What caused this?
Senator, the NTSB report is still ongoing. I'm not waiting to act.
You noted that you have a list of safety things you'd like to implement. Will you commit no more stock buybacks until those safety improvements are completed?
Senator, I will commit to continuing to invest in safety.
In other big Capitol Hill news today, we learned this afternoon that Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell is being treated for a concussion after he tripped and fell last night at a Senate Leadership Fund event at the Waldorf Hotel, the hotel formerly known as the Trump Hotel. McConnell's office released a brief statement late last night that the 81-year-old senator was taken to the hospital after a fall. They didn't give more details until late today. Before the concussion was confirmed this afternoon, the president and first lady had offered their well wishes. Senate Democratic leader, the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, also offered a prayer on the Senate floor this morning.
This morning, I offer a prayer of strength and healing for the leader and his family. I called the leader this morning and spoke briefly with his staff to extend my prayers and well wishes.
Mitch McConnell is the latest senator to receive hospital care for health issues. Democrat John Fetterman is currently in inpatient care for clinical depression. And Dianne Feinstein is away from Washington as she recovers from shingles. She had been hospitalized. She has since been released from the hospital for that. Ryan Nobles has the latest on both of these stories from Capitol Hill. And Ryan, I want to start with Norfolk Southern. Look, cutting through the sort of politicized questioning that can happen at these hearings, did he commit to not lobbying against new federal regulation? And what did he commit to on safety? Any specifics here? More staff? Different technologies, or was it as vague as the highlights we were playing at the top?
You probably won't be surprised to know that it is the latter, Chuck. It did seem to be a lot more of promising in very vague terms to be there until the very end to make sure that his company would do everything they could to fix this problem, but without any very specific amount of substance behind it. There is a bipartisan bill that's making its way through the Senate right now from both of Ohio's senators that would address some of these rail safety concerns. But Norfolk Southern does believe that they're not completely to blame for all of this. These cars are not necessarily owned or operated by the company. They're just responsible for transporting them.
Yeah.
That could be a cop-out, some might view. But regardless, what I think the tone Alan Shaw tried to strike here is that, yes, we want to take care of all of this. We just don't know what it's going to take care of all of it, and we don't want to promise anything that we can't deliver.
Ryan, so is he bringing another company in here? Are they passing the buck of blame that somehow the car itself, while they were the company pulling the car, that the car itself is the responsibility of another company that loaded the chemicals?
Yeah, so that, and part of that bit of sound that you played earlier when he talked about the NTSB investigation, because it has not necessarily been concluded yet as to how this accident happened, there is some thought that there was something that went faulty with the car itself. And these cars are not owned and operated by Norfolk Southern. They basically own the car, the engine at the front and the caboose at the back, and everything in between is owned by someone else. And so that may be part of what Congress needs to address in terms of the regulatory environment as it relates to the rail companies. Should Norfolk Southern have more control over the maintenance and care of these individual cars? It does perhaps sound like there's a bit of passing the buck that's going on here as well. But that's part of the reason that I think you see members of Congress so frustrated. And the other point I'd make to you, Chuck, and you understand kind of the weedsy part of this, is that this isn't really the committee that's going to deal with these fixes. This is the Commerce Committee or somewhere else is likely going to. This was just the first committee that had an excuse to bring him in front of them so that they could ask him all these tough questions. We're a long way away from seeing like substantive reform come out of Congress.
Yeah, it sounds like it's the civil litigation that'll probably clear up the ownership issues and all of that before any of this. But that seems like that is quite the thicket there. Let me move to Mitch McConnell. It was, it was a bit disconcerting that we went as long as we went with so little information, and I know there were a lot of people nervous. It sounds like we can all breathe a sigh of relief. Is he on the mend or not?
Yeah, that's the sense that we're getting, Chuck, and not just from the public statements that we're getting from his office, but also from his fellow senators who were briefed on his condition. Some have actually talked to him, so he is conscious. He's been able to have conversations with them. But it does seem like he took a pretty bad fall and was beat up a bit. A concussion is no doubt a serious situation. It's especially serious for someone who is 81 years old. And, of course, it's important to point out that Mitch McConnell does have lingering problems from his childhood polio, and that could have been part of what contributed to this. His legs aren't as strong as you would like them to be in a situation like this. But I think the big question everyone has right now, Chuck, is just how long of a recovery is this going to take? They're saying right now that he's going to be in the hospital still for the next couple of days, and they're not putting a timeline on when he could return. You know, I've been asked a lot today, you know, how does this impact the work of Congress? In the short term, probably not that big of a deal. You know, there's 2 Democrats that are currently here right now who are dealing with their own health issues, and John Fetterman and Dianne Feinstein, so the numbers really don't matter all that much. It's really the long-term issue, right? Because Mitch McConnell's the key negotiator in all these big things like the debt ceiling and the budget and things along those lines.
One important detail. Ryan, do we know, has Mitch McConnell talked with people? Is he alert? Is he dealing with Senate business? Does he know, you know, is he, sometimes a concussion can set you way back and sometimes it doesn't. Do we have those kind of details yet?
Yeah, so we don't know if he's, you know, being briefed on the business of the Senate, but we do know that he's had conversations with people. Senator John Barrasso, for instance, said that he talked to him, that they had a good conversation, that he expected him to make a full recovery. And of course, you know, Barrasso is a physician.
Yeah.
So his expertise goes beyond just a friendship here. So yes, he is conscious, and you know, the signs are that he'll be able to make a full recovery.
Those are important signs. Those are important signs. I unfortunately had friends in similar situations where it was a much more dire outlook. Anyway, Ryan Nobles on Capitol Hill for us. Ryan, thank you. Up next, President Biden lays out his 2024 priorities in battleground Pennsylvania. That's next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. A Bidenism that we've heard dozens of times from him, not just as president, as senator, as vice president, is show me your budget, and I'll tell you what you value. In fact, he said it today. So by that measure, the president just gave us a window into some of his key priorities for 2024 when he's expected to be in the heat of a presidential reelection campaign. And I will say this, at least he did something other presidents haven't done before, is that he sort of admitted that the budget is nothing more than a campaign platform, because he went ahead and unveiled it in a battleground state. He unveiled it in Philadelphia just a few minutes ago, the same city where he kicked off his 2020 campaign. So let's be clear on what this budget is and what it isn't. It isn't a realistic piece of legislation. It's not going to become law, and it's not intended to become law. It is intended to create a contrast with the other party. It is a potential roadmap for the issues that the White House wants to focus on and see if they could beat the other party over the head with these priorities. It includes a bevy of Democratic priorities. It includes restoring the child care tax credit, expanding access to pre-K and child care, cap the price of insulin at $35 a month, all of it paid by raising taxes on corporations and Americans making more than $400,000 a year, including a new tax on billionaires. And all told, the president said his plan would cut $3 trillion from the deficit over the next decade while extending the solvency of Medicare for an additional 25 years. In the near term, though, this budget would spend more money and have a bigger deficit in the coming year than it did last year. Joining me now is Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today, Democratic strategist Mo Alathe, and Republican strategist Doug Heye. Susan, I will say this. I at least appreciate the White House rolling it out in a campaign state. Let's not pretend this is a serious piece of legislation, and all of our inboxes are flooded with meaningless press releases about said budget. But what do you take away from it that says, okay, that's what they're focused on?
I take away from he's running for re-election. I think he's done a series of things in recent weeks on crime and on immigration and now on the budget that indicate that he is well into his re-election campaign. And he is outlining a different vision of the role of government than Republicans have. And there is almost no overlap between the priorities and approaches they would take on taxes and spending.
The budget director, she basically said, Mo, this is something to be contrasted with the other party. Here she is.
So lots of people in this town, as you've alluded to, want to talk about spending cuts. This president's actually putting forward a plan that reduces the deficit by, as you accurately state, nearly $3 trillion. On the other side of the aisle, we have a contrast, which is why it's important to put out budget plans and why we want our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to do the same. They have proposals that would add $3 trillion by giving tax cuts to the wealthy. So do you want to bring down the deficit by $3 trillion, or do you want to raise the deficit by $3 trillion?
Mo, I guess in poker terms, she's like, look, we'll show you our hand. Show me yours.
Well, and that's exactly what they're saying, right? They're saying to the Republicans who are coming out there now and attacking the president's budget, like, all right, what do you got now? Let's now go toe-to-toe and do this. Look, I think this is absolutely a statement of of values and a campaign strategy. And can I just say how refreshing it is to get back to this argument than a lot of the other nonsense Washington's been arguing over the past?
Well, we'll have those.
Yeah, there's plenty.
They go away. Yeah.
But
they get diluted.
It is about sort of who we are and what government's role should be and the kinds of things we should be investing in and not investing in. And it serves dual purpose. One, it does set up the upcoming campaign, but it also sets up some legislative maneuvering that the White House is eager to get into with the Republican House as we begin this showdown over the debt ceiling. And I think that is very much on the president's mind as well.
So, Doug, I would assume the last thing any Republican presidential candidate would want is for House Republicans to put out a budget.
Absolutely.
Right? Yes. But they're going to have to put out a budget here, don't they? They have to. They can't sit here and not do something they promised their own voters they would do.
So I gave up Frank Sinatra for Lent and fried food.
Yeah.
There's an old Sinatra song. I've heard that song before.
Yeah.
And this is exactly the conversation that we had a year ago, where we didn't want to be talking about some of these things. Mitch McConnell warned us, and Rick Scott came along and made sure that Democrats were talking about these things in attacking Republicans. We're in this same situation right now. If you're running for president, you do not want to be talking about and responding to what the House Republican budget is. There won't be a set.
Because that House Republican budget is going to become the nominee's budget as far as the Democratic campaign is concerned. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what we saw last year in the Senate races with the Rick Scott.
Well, that's what we saw with Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan's proposal, right? It became, and of course Mitt Romney picked him but it didn't matter. It was being thrown at him.
Yeah, look, those are the unfair politics of politics. And this is what every one of these candidates is going to have to deal with, minus potentially Donald Trump, because his ability to throw people under the bus and back that bus up and back, whether it's House Republicans or Senate Republicans, is pretty legendary. He may be poised to do that.
Yeah, but who does this empower? It empowers the Freedom Caucus.
That's exactly right.
Because they will have the sway.
They're going to want to put out a budget, right?
Oh, they promised. They got a promise that they could put out a budget
that balanced in 10 years. Good luck doing that.
Regular order.
Yeah. And now they've taken Pentagon off the table. They've taken Social Security off the table. They've taken Medicare off the table. They're going to have to devastate every other spending program that the federal government has.
You pivoted to something that actually I wanted to bring up. This is a massive increase. Joe Biden, massive increase in defense spending.
Yeah.
Mo. And so if there's one part of this budget that will suddenly, this is one of those you're like, yeah, it's all a fantasy. Not that defense budget. This might actually be, and it leads to this other issue, Mo. Progressives have been pretty muted over the last few months. I'm curious if they will be muted about this.
Well, look, they're getting a lot in this budget as well, right? They're getting
but the stuff they're getting is never going to pass. This defense budget increase will.
But this is a president who hasn't had any trouble standing up to the progressives when it comes to issues like this. We saw it when it came to policing. We've seen it on any number of other issues where the progressives will say, and their hands are kind of tied because they don't have anywhere else to go. Right. This is a good progressive president. He maybe doesn't go as far as they would like, but they get far better than the Freedom Caucus does on the right.
Are you thinking that most of the progressive leaders are becoming more pragmatic?
I think they are marginally pragmatic. I think they are looking at the Republican field and know that if they do not get behind this president, a divided Democratic Party won't survive 24.
Doug, this is a slight difference. There is whatever people want to say about the progressives pulling the Democratic Party to the left, they have been more muted at attacking their guy. They're not seeing that. The Republican Party is not allowed to compartmentalize the Trump base.
No, not at all. And part of what this move on the defense budget does for Biden is it further exposes Republican divides, where on Ukraine, which ties specifically into military spending, a lot of conservatives, for the first time I can remember, going back to well before Ronald Reagan, are now talking about cutting defense spending. This is not Ronald Reagan's party anymore, and we're right at the 40th anniversary of the Evil Empire speech. And this is not this is not Ronald Reagan's foreign policy. It's not his Republican Party either.
No, and this is the part where we'll see what happens. I have no idea how they're going to come up with a balanced budget that doesn't touch defense. I assume they won't increase it by as much as Biden wants to increase it. So suddenly they're going to look. I mean, this seems like they set themselves a trap, and the White House said, great.
Yeah.
Let's see it.
And they're trapped because they won't raise taxes.
Right.
And if you don't raise taxes, if you don't increase revenues, you're going to have to really slash spending. But, you don't have to use all real numbers in a budget, as we've learned. And so perhaps that is a solution.
What you're saying is put out a bunch of numbers that don't add up and just say, here's my budget. I mean, that is sort of caving into the whole idea that, well, there's at least one, channel that might go ahead and buy that BS, right? Is that what you end up doing?
You know, you do what you need to. Politicians in both parties do what they need to do. The worst situation to be in is to be the majority with a very narrow majority, because you can't lose anybody. It's much easier to hang yourself together to make serious proposals. If you're in the minority, you know it can't pass. You can stand on principle. You can say, let's raise taxes by trillions of dollars. Let's impose taxes on people making more than $400,000 a year on Medicare, and you don't have to live with the consequences because it's not going anywhere for at least 2 years.
Now, though we'll see, being in the minority with a very narrow, divided minority doesn't seem to be going well for the other side either. So.
Right.
Are you at all concerned, Mo, that it is sort of, in some ways, Biden does embrace the one stereotype that, yeah, we want to tax the rich? Do you think that's an issue anymore?
No, I don't.
I mean, look, I'm old enough to remember when Bill Clinton apologized to rich people for raising their taxes.
No, look.
Right? And, I mean, remember that famous quote? He says, you probably think I raise your taxes too much. I do too.
Yeah. Look, I don't think left versus right is what dominates people anymore, dominates voters. I think front versus back is, right? And so pitting and exploiting and focusing on that divide between people who feel like the elites are screwing them is where the politics of today is.
Right.
And it's for good reason, because people do feel that way. And when people see these billionaires and trillionaires getting these tax breaks, they're done with that.
Doug, aren't we close? It is funny because Susan's right. There's no way to do this budget without raising taxes. Corporations aren't popular on the right anymore. I'm surprised there hasn't been a few more of the J.D. Vance wing of the party to say, you know what, yeah, let's tax those guys.
You know, one of the things I learned working in House leadership was that taxes are not as sacrosanct for Republicans as we thought they were. When the Bush tax cuts were expiring, 2012, 2013, Grover Norquist, Americans for Tax Reform, said, the plan Republicans are putting together is a good plan, back it. And enough Republicans said, ooh, I don't know about that. It's not what it used to be as a salient issue.
I wonder if it is because these things poll very well across party lines, at least on that stuff.
I think imposing a huge tax on billionaires is undoubtedly popular with everyone who is not a billionaire.
Right.
And so that is probably a safe state.
It usually is. And last time I checked, the billionaire caucus.
Very small.
Well, it is pretty tiny. Anyway, Mo, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you. Susan, thank you both. After the break, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin meets with Israeli leaders as anti-government protests have been sweeping Israel's cities over the last couple of days. We'll have the latest on the ground in Tel Aviv next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin's shorter-than-planned trip to Israel happened today after the Israeli government asked him to delay his arrival by a day and restrict his movements once he got there on the ground. Austin met with his Israeli counterpart and with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, but he never left the confines of the airport. That's how bad things are right now in Israel. The purpose of this visit by Austin was to urge de-escalation in the occupied West Bank and to discuss the threat posed by Iran. But this trip's been overshadowed by the ongoing protests all across Israel. Demonstrators are holding another day of disruption today in response to the government's plan to overhaul its judicial system. Protesters blocked the roads to the country's airport. It caused Prime Minister Netanyahu to helicopter to his meeting with Lloyd Austin. Secretary Austin also had to briefly wade into Israel's domestic politics during a press conference today.
As President Biden has said, the genius of American democracy and Israeli democracy is that they are both built on strong institutions, on checks and balances, and on an independent judiciary.
Joining me now from Tel Aviv is our foreign correspondent, Raf Sanchez. So, Raf, obviously it's nighttime. I assume things have calmed down a little bit. But tomorrow's the Sabbath. What do we expect over the next few days?
Well, Chuck, we are seeing no signs that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is preparing to back down from these very controversial judicial reform plans, as he calls them. Just a reminder, under this proposed law, Israel's parliament would be able to vote by a simple majority to ignore rulings of the Supreme Court. Now, Netanyahu will tell you that that is curbing the excesses of activist judges, but the protesters we saw on the streets of Israel, on the highways of Israel today, in their tens of thousands, said they were deeply concerned about the impacts that this would have on Israeli democracy. And Chuck, I thought it was really interesting that Secretary Austin, who is not a particularly political person himself, he's a former soldier, weighed in on this internal Israeli domestic issue in his prepared remarks alongside the Israeli defense minister, which I think is a really clear sign that the Biden administration wanted to lay down a marker to the Israelis that they share at least some of the Israeli protesters' concerns. One last thing, Chuck, the Israeli president, who is a largely ceremonial figure but whose words hold a lot of moral weight, was on TV a couple of hours ago saying the divisions within Israel are a disaster, and he pleaded with Netanyahu to abandon these judicial overhaul plans, replace them with some kind of compromise. But right now, this standoff continues, Chuck.
Is there any point where we think these protests will let up, or will the Sabbath provide a pause?
It's a really good question. Netanyahu is actually out of town at the moment. He's gone to Rome for the weekend. This is kind of a controversial trip. He doesn't have a very full itinerary in Rome. It is his wedding anniversary. His wife is with him. So this is not a great look, Chuck, especially because there has been a terror attack here in Tel Aviv in the last couple of hours. A Hamas gunman opening fire on Israeli civilians at a cafe on a very busy street here in Tel Aviv. The shooter was killed, 3 civilians wounded, one of them in critical condition. So Netanyahu is under a lot of pressure right now. The country so deeply divided, but also this terror attack. Chuck?
That's for sure. Raf Sanchez in Tel Aviv for us. Raf, thank you. Still to come, as the abortion debate continues to divide the GOP. We're going to speak with Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who says she's trying to, quote, rein in some of the craziness inside her party. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Governor Gavin Newsom of California announced this week that his state will not renew a $54 million contract with Walgreens. Why? He's upset that the company announced it would not dispense a medication abortion pill in some states, even where abortion is legal. All of this comes as we wait for a ruling by a Trump-appointed federal judge that could pull a common abortion medication pill off the shelves nationwide. Bottom line, the spotlight on this issue of abortion in America not going away anytime soon, which arguably is probably not good news politically for the GOP as they continue to struggle to navigate this issue that has been a major political liability, particularly when you continue to look at what happened in 2022. I've seen some new data that only underscores for women that were self-described independents, abortion was the #1 issue they voted on. Joining me now is Congresswoman Nancy Mace, a Republican from South Carolina, who's criticized her party over these stricter and total bans that have been around the country. Congresswoman, it's good to see you, and we have you on today because you introduced a new bill on contraception, trying to make it more over-the-counter completely. Give me a little bit of details. If your bill passed, what do you believe it would do?
Well, particularly after Roe v. Wade being overturned, we want to make sure that women have access to birth control wherever they can get it. And this bill would speed up the application process to the FDA for approval, would cut that time in half. It would also waive the fees for companies that are applying for self-administered birth control options for women. It would waive those fees and make it more efficient and more affordable as well down the line through that application process. So it would speed it up. It still makes it safe and more cost effective because we want women to have access to it no matter where they are.
Do you believe we can make all birth control over the counter?
Well, I think for self-administered birth control, that should be an option if we can do that. In my home state of South Carolina, Chuck, we have entire counties in rural areas that don't have a single OBGYN doctor. So what are we going to do to help improve the lives of those women? If we're serious about saving lives, then certainly, especially in states where they're banning abortion, we ought to give every woman access to the birth control that they want and need.
We could sit here and talk about specifics. I could talk about the 6-week ban that's proposed in Florida. We could talk about this court case. But I want to go big picture here with you for a second. Do you feel as if anybody in your party saw their election returns in 2022? Because I look around at some of these, and I don't mean to be a bit cynical about this, but it's like there seems to be a whistling past where the public is on this, particularly with voters, with women voters on the center, right, and in the middle.
Right. We clearly buried our heads in the sand after Dobbs. And you said earlier that for independents and for women especially, that it was their #1 issue. I represent a district where we have independents, Republicans, and Democrats. Independents outnumber Republicans by double digits. Independents and Democrats outnumber Republicans in my district 2-1. But across the board, in my election, the #2 issue, #1 was inflation, but the #2 issue for everybody, regardless of politics, was abortion. And we don't have a plan. We're not working together. We're not showing compassion for women, especially women who've been raped, especially for girls who are victims of incest, especially for women in poor and rural areas that don't have access to birth control or doctors who can get them birth control. What are we doing? What's the plan? And so I decided, Chuck, that just about every week that we're in session for at least the first part of this year, I'm filing a bill addressing these issues. And this week, it was this contraception bill to speed up the process for self-administered birth control.
What do you think should happen if this federal judge decides to essentially take that one of those abortion pills off the market? What would you like to see the federal government do? What do you think state governors should do? Is there anything that can be done?
Well, I find it very difficult to believe that a medical product that was approved by the FDA could be pulled off the shelves. And so I would imagine that would have to go through the courts and up to the Supreme Court as well. But I have a hard time seeing how that would be legal in this country, regardless of the way you felt about that medication.
And I'm not trying to bait you here, but do you think a Republican can run on the idea that they're for freedom if they're in favor of these extraordinarily restrictive laws on abortion, 6 weeks and things like that?
Well, I'll tell you, in the state of South Carolina, a state lawmaker just last week filed a bill that would allow women to be executed who had abortions. If we're going to say women can't travel out of state, if we're going to say women should be executed for having an abortion, these are not messages that we can stand behind. And we have to stand up to the extremism and show some balance, show a way that we can protect the right to life and protect women's rights. Because when you talk to women across the country and across the political spectrum, we agree somewhere in the middle. There are a number of things that we agree with on this issue, whether it's 20 weeks or 15 weeks, or looking at contraception and the right to access those things, women who've been raped, girls who are victims of incest. There are many things that we agree on, but my party's silent on these issues, and I refuse to be silent. I'm going to continue to be vocal and fight for women everywhere.
Hey, before I let you go, considering what's happened with January 6th again and it's dividing your party again, you think it was the right call for Kevin McCarthy to unilaterally give the January 6th footage to a lone host? I don't know what to call him.
I said so on February 22nd. I disagreed with that decision. I believe if we're going to release that footage, release it to every media outlet and release it to every defense attorney who said they didn't have access to it, and to the public at large, so they can make a decision after seeing that footage on their own. Right, but doing it this way sort of probably was the worst of all outcomes? Well, I don't believe in filtering it through a singular lens. This is something that happened. It was not a good day in our country, and everyone in our country should be able to see what happened that day. It was a very difficult day. You were there. Was it violent? We don't want to repeat history. Was it violent? It was. It was. And I will tell you, I had death threats leading up to that because I said I was going to certify the Electoral College. And ever since then, Chuck, I've had to carry a gun everywhere I go. And I've been very vocal about that. But at the same time, we can learn from this. We can work on ensuring it doesn't happen again, ensure that we are being honest with the American people, and heal our nation. We've got to heal. Let me ask you a quick question on presidential politics. If you decide to endorse, will their position on abortion matter to you before you make that decision? I'm thinking Nikki Haley or Tim Scott in particular. It is, and it is. And I've talked to people. This is an issue that is near and dear to my heart, and I know that it matters to my voters. It matters to my constituents. It matters to my state. And if we want to be serious about winning the White House in 24, then we've got to be serious when we're talking about this issue. Do you think you're the candidate? Do you think Nikki Haley has the right position on this yet? We've had some very encouraging conversations about the issue. I've talked to her about it. It's one of the first subjects I brought up when I heard she was going to be running for Congress, and I was impressed with her responses, and I hope that there are others who will feel the same way.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace, Republican from Charleston area in South Carolina. Appreciate you coming on, sharing your perspective with us. Always good to get it.
Thank you.
You got it. Thank you all for being with us this hour. I'm going to be back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. But NBC News Now coverage will continue with my friend Tom Costello. He's sitting in today for Hallie Jackson. And the show begins right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.